I have a severe case of separation anxiety. If I am separated from my brother for more than 2 hours, my body begins to convulse, and I feel as though I am suffocating. Fortunately, my brother spoils me rotten. Not only does he take me to his company to work alongside him, but he also allows me to skip school entirely. I lived in this blissful bubble of dependency, assuming it would last forever. That was until the day the neighbor's son got married. It was a wake-up call that hit me like a bucket of ice water. Brothers get married. My brother could get married. Panic set in immediately. What was I supposed to do? I did not want a sister-in-law. Adam, look at you. How old are you now? Why do you still need your brother to hold you like a baby? I was nestled comfortably in Henry's arms, lazily lifting my eyelids to look at the source of the noise. I squeezed out a single, disdainful syllable from my nasal cavity. Humph. The person speaking was a new intern at the company, an Omega who had secured his position through nepotism. He loved to make his presence known in front of my brother, showing off how approachable and unpretentious he supposedly was. Now, he was displaying a complete lack of awareness by coming over to interrupt our afternoon nap. Yes, a nap. Although it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my brother, Henry, insisted that I hadn't slept well the night before and needed to catch up on my rest. Consequently, the entire top floor of the skyscraper was silent enough to hear a pin drop, save for the rhythmic tapping of keyboards in the distance. Henry lowered his eyes, sweeping a cold glance over the intern. The fingers that were originally resting lightly on my waist tightened, like a beast claiming its territory. His voice was low, carrying a chill that felt like shards of ice. Is there something you need? The intern choked on those two indifferent words, his face flushing a deep, embarrassed red. He stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. I buried my face into Henry's chest, taking pleasure in the intern's misfortune. My muffled laughter vibrated against Henry's chest, causing his thoracic cavity to tremble slightly. A faint scent of bitter orange wafted from Henry's body. It was crisp, like a freshly peeled lime, yet grounded with the cool, woody aroma of cedar. It smelled incredibly good. I loved it to death. I wondered when he had sprayed this perfume, as I hadn't seen him do it. If there is nothing else, get out, Henry said, his voice dropping even lower. The ending note of his sentence sank, sounding like a dangerous warning. The intern scrambled away, tail between his legs. I laughed even more presumptuously. The entire city knew how important I was to Henry. He had picked me up from the streets and raised me with his own hands, caring for me more deeply than any biological father ever could. Let alone holding me for an afternoon nap. If I wanted the stars from the sky right now, Henry would likely start building a rocket immediately. In other words, as long as I didn't break the law, I could rely on my brother to walk sideways through this life, untouchable. I rubbed my cheek against Henry's chest triumphantly, like a satisfied cat. Henry let out a soft chuckle, the pad of his thumb gently caressing the back of my neck. Although there was no gland there, the skin was thin enough to show the flush of blood beneath, and it was the place he most loved to linger. The sound of his fountain pen scratching across paper filled the silence. Henry, I said, suddenly tilting my head back so my nose almost brushed against his sharp, cold jawline. What perfume are you wearing? I want to buy a bottle next time. Henry's hand, which was signing a document, paused. He looked down at me, his gaze behind the silver-rimmed glasses deep and unfathomable. He asked, sounding casual, what do you smell? I tried hard to recall the scent, but I found that the specific aroma had already faded significantly. I can't quite describe it, I murmured. It's a bit like lime, and a bit like orange. Anyway, it smells really good. I've never smelled it before. As I spoke, I couldn't resist leaning in closer to the side of his neck to sniff again, but this time I only smelled the familiar, clean scent of laundry detergent. Henry's Adam's apple rolled visibly. His eyes were darker than before. Is that so? It might be the new laundry detergent. I wrinkled my nose in disbelief. What laundry detergent smells like that? You definitely use some good stuff secretly and won't tell me. Henry let me grab his collar and shake him back and forth, his voice remaining gentle. Adam, stop fussing. How about this? Next week, I'll take you for a physical examination. We'll just check your nose, okay? I muttered in my heart that it was strange, but I never argued with whatever Henry said. All right. I agreed obediently, shrinking back into his arms. A checkup was just a checkup. Since childhood, he had handled all my medical reports personally. Maybe he was just finding a random excuse to make me happy and take me out to play. After all, my brother loved me the most. When we returned home that evening, two people were standing at our doorstep. One large, one small. In their hands, they carried two boxes tied with satin ribbons. The ribbons were a bright, garish pink, tacky and eye-catching. Sitting on Henry's shoulders, I recognized them at a glance. It was the Miller siblings from next door. They didn't seem surprised to see me in this position. They paused only briefly before raising bright smiles and walking toward us. Henry, Adam. Walking in front was the eldest son of the Miller family, Julian. He was 2 years older than me. When he smiled, there was a shallow dimple at the corner of his mouth, making him look sunny and cheerful. However, I didn't like him much. He smiled too much, and it looked fake. Plus, he always liked to sidle up to Henry. Last time, he gave Henry a tie that was incredibly flashy. I had secretly thrown it into the toilet and flushed it away. Henry, I got married, Julian said, his eyes curving into crescents as he handed over one of the boxes. My sister and I came specifically to deliver wedding candy. Happy wedding, Henry said, taking the box. His tone was bland, betraying no emotion. But Julian was thrilled, his eyes narrowing into slits. Henry, when will you consider it? An alpha is excellent as you must have many omegas lining up. Before he could finish his sentence, his little sister, Lily, tugged on the hem of his jacket. A snot bubble on the 5-year-old's face popped with a soft sound, and she burst into loud wails. Big brother, don't get married. Don't get married. Otherwise, the little brother will be like Lily. No brother anymore. So pitiful. So pitiful. Married. I froze for a moment, blinking my eyes rapidly. I didn't react immediately. What did getting married mean? Our neighbor, Mr. Wallace, got married, and then he had a fierce wife who controlled everything. She didn't allow Mr. Wallace to talk to the pretty lady next door, and she even dug out all the private money Mr. Wallace had hidden. On television, they acted it out too. After an alpha gets married, they bring an omega home. They kiss and hug the omega every day. They buy the omega all sorts of gifts. If my brother got married, would he be like Mr. Wallace? Would he be controlled by a fierce omega? Would he kiss and hug that omega every day? Would he buy gifts for that omega and then have no money left to buy me snacks? Subconsciously, I tightened my grip on Henry's hair. I suddenly realized that brothers could get married too. Adam, Henry sighed helplessly, trying to pry my fingers loose. But I had no time to pay attention to his discomfort. So, Henry, I asked, my voice trembling, will you really get married? Once we were inside and the door was closed, I sat clutching the bag of wedding candy. I untied the ribbon, and round chocolate beans rolled out. I picked one up and stuffed it into my mouth. The cloying sweetness spread across the tip of my tongue. If you get married, I asked, my speech slurred as the sugar numbed my taste buds and made my brain sluggish. Can only two people live together? Henry was changing his shoes in the entryway. Hearing this, his movements paused. 3 seconds later, he turned around. The gaze behind his lenses was calm and gentle. Why do you ask? His voice was slow and methodical, like he was coaxing a child. I sniffled and peeled another chocolate, stuffing it into my mouth. I mumbled, just asking casually. In reality, my heart was a mess, like a ball of yarn that couldn't be untangled. I didn't want my brother to get married. Not at all. If he got married, he wouldn't be my brother alone anymore. He would be shared by someone else. He would be snatched away. Just thinking about it made my heart feel like it was being squeezed by a giant hand. My breathing became difficult, but I couldn't say these words out loud. Saying them would make me seem petty, selfish, and sensible. Henry would be unhappy. He would think I didn't know what was good for me. He would think I took all his kindness for granted. I didn't dare make Henry unhappy. Even though I was bratty and willful, I always knew deep down that I was just an unwanted orphan. Everything I had was given by him. I couldn't leave him. That night, after showering, I hugged Henry's large pillow and rolled onto the bed. The pillow smelled of his body wash, a clear cedar scent mixed with a faint hint of bitter orange. It was just like him, cold yet gentle. I buried my face in the pillow, taking several messy, deep breaths. But my brain couldn't stop thinking wild thoughts. For the first time in 18 years, I had a nightmare. In the dream, Henry was wearing a crisp, tailored suit. A white flower was pinned to his chest. He looked devastatingly handsome. He stood at the end of a red carpet covered in fresh flowers, smiling at me. I ran toward him happily, wanting to throw myself into his arms and hug his waist like I always did. But as I got closer, I realized there was someone else standing next to him. It was an Omega wearing a white formal gown. The Omega held his arm, smiling like a flower, wearing an expression of sweet bliss. Henry looked down at the Omega, his eyes so gentle they seemed like they could drip water. It was a tenderness I had never seen before. He didn't even look at me once. It was as if he had completely forgotten my existence. Henry. I grabbed the corner of his jacket in a panic, wanting him to look at me, wanting him to hug me. But he just frowned, as if he had been touched by something dirty. He shook off my hand with disgust. Adam, look how old you are. Can you stop sticking to me like a dog? It's disgusting. His voice was ice cold, strange, and distant. It was like a knife stabbing ruthlessly into my heart. Henry, it's me. It's your Adam. I shouted desperately. I tried to explain, but Henry still didn't look at me. He took his Omega's hand and turned to walk into the church. The church doors slowly closed in front of me, completely shutting me out of his world. No. Brother, don't go. Don't leave me. I woke up screaming, sitting up abruptly. My chest heaved violently, sounding like broken bellows, emitting dull gasps. My face was wet. I couldn't tell if it was sweat or tears. The room was pitch black, lit only by the faint moonlight filtering in from outside. It was terrifyingly quiet. Suddenly, the bedside lamp clicked on. A warm palm pressed against the back of my neck, massaging a soft spot, as if confirming something. I shuddered at the touch. My monitoring bracelet was beeping wildly, alerting us to my rapid heart rate. Henry. I sniffled, looking up. I realized that at some point, I had been pulled onto Henry's lap. This position made me half a head taller than him. Looking up at me, his expression was as devout as someone praying in a church, if you ignored the hand still pinching my waist. Subconsciously, I tried to lie down and roll off his lap, but he supported my hips, keeping me in place. Adam. Breathe. His voice was low and slow, carrying a hypnotic rhythm. Follow me. Inhale. Instinctively, I adjusted my breathing to match his rhythm. My nose inevitably brushed against the old scar under his Adam's apple. That was left from when I was kidnapped by a rival family as a child, and he took a knife for me. The scar trembled as he spoke, tickling my lips. I stared at his throat in a daze. It was sexy and tempting. I wanted to kiss it. Acting on a ghostly impulse, I lifted my head and closed my lips over his Adam's apple. Then, Henry got out of bed. He spent 2 hours showering in the bathroom. How much did he despise me? Because of what happened the previous night, I started a unilateral Cold War with Henry. I demanded that he not speak to me, not touch me, and not enter my room for 3 days. Henry was surprisingly cooperative. Not only did he move to the guest bedroom, but he also had the housekeeper, Mrs. Zhang, thoroughly disinfect our room. The smell of disinfectant was pungent, making me dizzy and even more aggrieved. I locked myself in the room, pulling the heavy blackout curtains shut. The room was dark as a sealed jar. I didn't even go downstairs for lunch, listlessly making do with half a bag of chocolate beans left over from the night before. Usually, by this time, Henry would have knocked on the door asking what flavor of ice cream I wanted. But today, it was silent outside the room. Even the sound of breathing seemed absent. Henry was truly angry. He must think I was disgusting. A pervert. Maybe he was already planning in his mind which mental hospital to send me to. The more I thought about it, the more scared I became. Tears welled up uncooperatively again. I grabbed a pillow in frustration and covered my face, muffling my whimpers in the cotton. I couldn't cry. If I cried, Henry would hate me even more. I tried hard to hold back the tears, sniffling. My head felt heavy and groggy. I rolled out of bed and walked to the desk. Driven by a strange compulsion, I opened the drawer and dug out a tablet I hadn't used in a long time. This tablet wasn't connected to Henry's devices and wasn't under his surveillance. I could register a completely new account, and he wouldn't know what I was searching for online. I curled up in the gaming chair, my toes unconsciously rubbing against the velvet of the rug. When the registration page popped up, my fingers hovered over the nickname field for a long time. Finally, I typed, "Wants to eat carrots." The opposite of reality felt safer. I chose a crying rabbit emoji as my avatar. It looked harmless enough. In the forum categories, the emotional world section floated with pink heart icons. I clicked to open a new post. My fingertips ghosted over the virtual keyboard a few times. Help. How to stop brother from marrying a sister-in-law. The cursor blinked in the title bar like the green dot on a heart rate monitor. I bit my nails, thinking. I deleted sister-in-law and replaced it with someone else, but it felt insufficiently direct. Finally, throwing caution to the wind, I typed, my brother is getting married. What do? I don't want him to marry anyone else. I am a male beta. Waiting online, urgent. The moment I pressed send, cold sweat broke out on my back. Even though the room was set to a constant 78 degrees, I felt a flame shooting up my spine. After refreshing 3 times, the first reply finally popped up. The comment read, incestuous vibes. I suggest you just drug him. My hand shook, and the tablet almost fell to the floor. What kind of wild talk was this? Just as I was about to report it, a second reply jumped out. The second user wrote, ignore the outlaw above. Listen to me. Sleep in your brother's shirts every day. Pretend to be an omega and heat in front of him. Alphas are possessive monsters. Once they mark you, they won't let you go. A third comment appeared. LOL, do you guys think this is a movie? If you ask me, just turn yourself into an omega. Works every time. Attached was a purchase link for an omega differentiation inducer. Differentiation into a weak, heat-suffering omega? But Henry had said he liked me best the way I was now. I didn't want that. Suddenly, a new message notification chimed. It was a private message. A user named White Yiksha had sent a message. Little pitiful thing. Your brother is an alpha, right? I'll teach you a method. The law of seduction. Turn yourself into your own sister-in-law. Speaking from experience. Guaranteed to work. I stared at that line of text, my throat tightening. My palms were so sweaty I could barely hold the tablet. Suddenly, I smelled the scent of bitter orange. Startled, I whipped my head around. The empty room smelled only of disinfectant. It was a hallucination. Ding dong. Henry's message suddenly popped up on the screen. Adam, I will be a bit busy these next few days. Take good care of yourself for now. Normally, I would have rushed downstairs by now to tell him not to worry. But right now, my legs felt like they were filled with lead. The chat box showed typing, and then stopped, repeating 3 times. I knew what this meant. It was Henry's susceptibility period, his rut. Usually, during these times, I would obediently stay away. But now, my gaze fell on that private message. It was as if I had made a certain resolve. In the pitch-black villa, clutching a large box, I sneaked into Henry's room. Instantly, overwhelming alpha pheromones wrapped in a heat wave slapped against my face, making my knees go weak. The bottom of the box knocked against the doorframe with a muffled thud. The items inside clattered and vibrated. Henry stood with his back to me in front of the window. His white shirt was soaked in moonlight, the contours of his shoulder blades clearly visible beneath the fabric. When he turned, he brought a rush of air with him. The scent of bitter orange mixed with the metallic tang of blood rushed toward me. Who let you in? His voice was hoarse, as if ground by sandpaper. Every word carried a scorching pant. Instinctively, I took half a step back. My heel hit the doorframe. The box slipped from my hands and crashed onto the carpet. Metal chains and leather straps spilled out, glinting coldly in the moonlight. Henry's gaze swept over the objects. His Adam's apple rolled heavily. I had never seen a look like that in his eyes before. It was like a wild beast wanting to tear me apart and devour me. My face burned with shame. I squatted down to pick up the toys on the floor. Henry, listen to me. Suddenly, the back of my neck was grabbed. I was slammed against the wall. My spine hit the light switch, and the overhead light blazed on instantly. Only then did I clearly see the bloodshot veins in his eyes and the bulging veins on his neck. He propped one hand beside my ear, the other pinching my waist. The heat radiating through his thin clothes made me tremble. You smelled it, didn't you? His burning lips grazed my earlobe, triggering a shudder. You smelled my scent. I opened my mouth, but my throat felt blocked by cotton. I had indeed smelled it. Pheromones 100 times more intense than usual, wrapped in a cloying sweetness. It was like a ripe fruit bursting with juice. My legs went uncontrollably soft. If he hadn't been pinning me up, I would have slid to the floor long ago. I suddenly realized, I might really be differentiating into an Omega. Henry suddenly buried his face in my neck, his canine teeth pressing against that thin patch of skin. It's not too late to run. His breath sprayed against my collarbone, raising tiny goosebumps. I grabbed the hem of his shirt, the fabric bunching up in my palm. I won't run. My voice shook terribly, but it was strangely firm. When a stinging pain came from the back of my neck, I heard the crisp sound of a belt buckle hitting the floor. Henry's palm slid down my spine, igniting sparks wherever it touched. In the chaos, we kicked the overturned box. The metal chains rattled. I suddenly remembered the confetti thrown at a wedding once. The way those shiny fragments floated in the air inexplicably overlapped with the swaying light and shadows on the ceiling right now. My monitoring bracelet let out a piercing alarm. My heart rate was about to break the threshold. Henry suddenly stopped moving. He rested his forehead against my shoulder, panting. "Tomorrow, I'm taking you to the hospital." I hummed a confused agreement, then suddenly realized. The hospital? Right. The checkup. A beta who could smell alpha pheromones was as rare as an iron tree blossoming. Henry must have guessed I was differentiating. "Henry, aren't we continuing?" My voice was so sticky it startled even me. The ending note trembled and floated upward. Henry suddenly grabbed my wrist, his grip so hard the monitoring band dug into my flesh. His shirt collar was askew, his collarbone covered in sweat. His chest heaved violently as he pushed me away. "Put on your clothes." His voice was terrifyingly hoarse. He pulled a long trench coat from the closet and threw it at me. I didn't catch it. I knew the chance to become his sister-in-law only came once. "Henry, I think I really differentiated." I deliberately pulled my collar loose, revealing my flushed collarbone. "Smell it. Is there an Omega scent?" He braced himself against the wall behind me with one hand, his breath spraying behind my ear. "Do you know what you are doing?" "I know," I said, standing on tiptoe to rub my nose against the tip of his. "You taught me." Taking responsibility for my own choices. Before he could speak, I rubbed against the back of his hand where the veins were bulging. "Anyway, if I differentiate, I can smell your pheromones. That way, you won't marry anyone else. Right? Anything those Omegas can do, I can do. I'm better behaved than them." My words were cut off by a sudden sensation of weightlessness. Henry threw me over his shoulder and carried me to the bay window. The moonlight felt like cold water pouring over my back. With one hand, he undid my monitoring band and threw it away. The sound of the metal clasp hitting the wall made me flinch. Looking at me, he pinched my chin, forcing me to look up. "How many scents can you smell now?" Inside the intense bitter orange aroma, there was a mix of rust and a faint, elusive sweetness. I licked my dry lips. Like an orange grove before a storm. Dangerous, but full of temptation. Henry's throat moved. Suddenly, he tore open his shirt. That old scar crossing his chest glowed pale pink in the moonlight. It was left from when I was kidnapped at 8 years old. Back then, they held a knife to this spot. He grabbed my fingers and pressed them against the scar. "Do you know why I didn't die?" I shook my head. My palm was full of sweat. Because the leader of the kidnappers was an Omega. I released an 80% concentration of pheromones. The scar under my fingertips felt hot. I suddenly remembered the news about the Omega criminal who had a mental breakdown and committed suicide. In the next second, Henry proved my guess. What you are smelling right now is a concentration capable of destroying an Omega's nervous system. And you are actively inhaling it. The monitoring bracelet in the corner flashed red wildly. Only then did I realize my breath was frighteningly hot. My differentiating body felt like it had been thrown into boiling water. Every pore was screaming. "Do you still want to continue?" Henry's voice was as light as a sigh. "You might die." I grabbed the hand pinching my waist and tremblingly pressed it against my own carotid artery. The blood vessel jumping beneath the skin pressed against his palm, like prey actively offering its throat to the blade. "Henry, you couldn't bear to." I lowered my eyes and murmured, "No one is more suitable than me to be your Omega. Others might die, but I definitely won't. Because you love me." "Suitable." Henry's thumb rubbed the hollow beneath my collarbone. "Do you know what an Omega has to go through after being marked?" I shook my head. His expression turned sharp. "After being marked, you need a re-injection of pheromones every 3 months. Otherwise, it will hurt so much you'll want to dig your glands out." His fingertips crawled down my spine. You need regular checks on the development of the reproductive cavity. Using a dilator. Henry, I grabbed his wandering hand. You can't scare me. The gauze curtains of the bay window were lifted by the night breeze. Moonlight flowed between us. Henry suddenly smiled. It was a very soft breath of sound. Like self-mockery. Or perhaps relief. When I picked you up back then, there was a note stuffed in your swaddling clothes. I froze. He had never mentioned this before. It said intersex deformity. Bad luck charm. His expression softened. But what they didn't want, I raised as a treasure for 18 years. Henry finally let go of me. He took a syringe of inhibitors from the drawer. The pale blue liquid looked like melted gems in the moonlight. So, I'll ask one last time. He pressed the needle against the side of his own neck. Do you want me to be your brother, or your alpha? I lunged forward, snatched the syringe, and threw it out the window. I want you to love me. I bit down on his Adam's apple. Using every method you know. Then be good. When Henry cupped the back of my head, and we fell back onto the pillows, I smelled blood. His. Mine. Mixed with pheromones, brewing into the sweetest, most metallic wine. Going to the hospital for a checkup happened 7 days later. On the car ride back, I leaned lazily against the seat, listening to Henry's phone vibrate 7 times. On the 8th ring, he finally picked up. I heard Julian saying tomorrow was the wedding rehearsal and to bring Adam along to play. The end of his sentence carried a fawning probe. No. Henry hung up and put the phone down. His left hand unconsciously turned his wedding ring. I stared at that reflecting circle, suddenly grabbing his wrist. The leather seat made a friction noise. The assistant glanced in the rearview mirror. Henry. I pressed my forehead against his shoulder. Do you wear this because you were married before? The car drove into a tunnel. Darkness swallowed his momentarily stiff expression. I had never asked about Henry's romantic history because I thought it wasn't important. But now it was different. I was his omega. However, unexpectedly, Henry said nothing. It's not important. Not important? Why would it not be important? That was a wedding ring. I felt a bit dejected. That person must have been very important to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have worn it for so many years. Amidst the dappled shadows of the trees, that glimmer of silver flickered in and out of sight, like a thorn stuck in my heart. In the rearview mirror, I saw my own pale face, the corners of my eyes flushing an unnatural red. I knew I was going to cry again. My heart ached with a squelching pain. Even though I had been with Henry for 7 days, nothing had really changed. I still slept in the master bedroom. He still checked my sleep monitoring data promptly at 3 a.m. Aside from the bite marks occasionally visible under his shirt collar, even Mrs. Zhang hadn't noticed anything unusual. It wasn't until the afternoon of the 10th day. I woke up from a nap on the study sofa to find Henry frowning at his computer screen. His left hand was unconsciously turning that wedding ring again. The cold glint of the platinum hurt my eyes. I walked over barefoot and stepped on his bare slippers. Henry, I want strawberry cake. He closed the laptop. The gaze behind his lenses fell on my bare ankles. Put on your shoes. No. I deliberately rubbed my toes against his calf. The cold made him frown. Usually, by now, he would have pulled me onto his lap. But today he just stood up to get my slippers. I stared at his back. Henry never abandoned me to do other things. Unless. I rushed over and yanked his wrist. The monitoring band let out a short alarm. Who are you going to see? He silently placed the slippers at my feet. I kicked them away. The slippers hit the bookcase with a muffled thud. It's that Omega who gave you the ring, isn't it? You're going on a date with them. My voice was so shrill it scared me. Adam. Henry's voice was very soft. But I felt like someone had pressed the pause button on me. This ring. You made it out of Play-Doh when you were 6. I was stunned. My memory suddenly flashed back to that stormy night. I was curled up in his arms, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Henry, if you get married later, will you not want me anymore? Then Adam will make a ring for Henry. If Henry wears it, he won't ever get married. Henry took off his monocle, revealing the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. Later, I had someone customize a platinum version based on the style you made. He took off the ring band. The inner wall was clearly engraved with a crooked LMY. My initials. The cicadas outside the window suddenly became very loud. Can you put on your shoes now? Henry bent down to ask. I lifted my foot and stepped onto his palm. Then why did you say it wasn't important? Did you think I was being unreasonable? Do you not want to marry me anymore? Not good enough. 3 simple words. I didn't think much of it, because Henry always gave me better things. I pounced on him and bit his ear. Henry, feed me cake. His palms supporting my hips felt hot. Business first. Only then did I see the document on the coffee table, Omega Rights Protection Agreement. Henry flipped to the title page. His fountain pen hovered over the Guardian's signature line. After signing this, the Civil Affairs Bureau will recognize our relationship. He paused, his voice trembling slightly. Will you sign? Adam. I grabbed his wrist and asked with a smile. Then will you buy me new strawberry cake? Every day. I will. Will you tie my shoelaces? Until I'm 80? I will. I swallowed. Will you love me even more than now? Henry suddenly pulled the pen away. The nib scratched across the webbing of my thumb. The slight sting made me pull my hand back, but he grabbed my wrist and pressed it against the agreement. The cold paper stuck to my palm. His fingers interlaced with mine. After signing, the way I love you will change. His voice was as light as a feather brushing against my eardrum. It's not too late to regret it now. No regrets. Sign it, Henry. I grabbed the pen and wrote my name in the signature box first, Adam Lee. I suddenly remembered the answer in the forum. Turn yourself into your own sister-in-law. I seemed to have succeeded. To hold a wedding with Henry. Lacking experience, I decisively thought of Julian. While Henry was away at a meeting in a neighboring city, I sneaked into his study to look for the invitation. The Miller family wedding was being held at the Cloud Top Hotel, which happened to be where Henry often took me for afternoon tea. I put on a hooded sweatshirt and buried my face in the collar to sneak into the banquet hall. The crystal chandeliers were dazzling. I hid behind the dessert table, gnawing on a macaron. Julian was shuttling through the crowd in a white suit. The flower on his chest was even tackier than the candy box sent that day. Suddenly, someone tapped my shoulder. Cream smeared onto my mask. Adam. Julian's father, Richard Davis, stood there holding a champagne glass. His eyes behind his glasses narrowed into slits. Henry didn't come? I shook my head, stuffing the last half of a cream puff into my mouth. He tapped his index finger against the glass wall. The ice cubes clinked. I heard you two are getting married. I choked. Powdered sugar went down my windpipe. Heh, truly laughable. The tissue Richard handed me smelled of cologne, completely different from what Henry used. Do you know? When Henry was 16, the person he wanted to marry wasn't you. The hand wiping my mouth paused. I suddenly thought of the ring on Henry's hand. Who was it? Catherine. Henry's sponsor from when he was 6 to 16. He took out a photo. The woman in the photo wore a beige knit shirt. Her eyebrows and eyes bore a 70% resemblance to mine. Surprised? Haha. You didn't know, did you? Back then, that shameless woman hooked up with Henry. She even got pregnant with a bastard. If I hadn't caught them, I fear I would have been kept in the dark my whole life. He slammed the glass onto the marble counter. Now it's great. The bastard is about to become a child bride. My face turned pale. What do you mean? It means you are father and son. The person he loved was your mother. And you, this substitute, are committing incest with your biological father. Richard laughed maniacally, filled with the thrill of revenge. I stumbled backward, knocking over a champagne tower. Amidst the sound of shattering glass, Richard's voice drilled into my eardrums like a poisonous snake. Don't believe me? That scar on the left side of your chest. It's from when your mom jumped off a building holding you. My fingertips unconsciously touched that scar. Every time Henry kissed it, he would tremble. It turned out it wasn't heartache. It was guilt. I threw you in the trash back then. I didn't expect that mongrel to go digging through it, Richard said, approaching with his wine glass. He raised you just to raise a substitute for Catherine. I grabbed a dining knife and pressed it against his throat. The tip of the knife trembled against his artery. You're lying. Richard laughed, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes bunching together. Go check. I'm not afraid. It didn't look like a lie at all. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared in the reflection of the banquet hall's revolving door. Henry stood backlit in the doorway. His suit was damp with evening dew. In his hand, he still clutched the strawberry cake he had bought for me. Adam. His voice was very soft, but I pulled my hand back as if burned. When the dining knife fell to the floor, my monitoring bracelet let out a piercing screech. Henry stepped over the floor full of glass shards and walked over. The ribbon of the cake box brushed against my knee. Didn't we agree to wait for me to come home, to try on suits? Richard suddenly laughed wildly. CEO Lee, you came just in time. Tell your son how you and Catherine were in the attic back then. Henry grabbed an ice bucket and splashed it over him. Ice cubes slid down Richard's greasy hair. He wiped his face and tried to speak, but Henry grabbed him by the neck and pinned him against the dessert table. When you forced her to get an abortion back then, why didn't you say these pretty words? Henry's fingertips dug into his fat. Do you need me to help you remember how red the blood in the operating room was? I stared at the bulging veins on the back of Henry's hand. I suddenly remembered the day he taught me to write my name. I was 6 and couldn't hold a pen. He wrapped his hand around mine and drew circles on the paper. Asterisk Mingyu. It means precious jade. You are brother's treasure. Asterisk, it turned out it wasn't naming. It was mourning. Henry threw Richard aside. When he turned around, the scarlet in his eyes hadn't faded. He took off his tie and wrapped it around my trembling hand. Let's go home. The car air freshener was the citrus scent I had picked out. At this moment, however, it was mixed with the unpleasant smell of blood. Henry's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel. 2 buttons on his shirt had popped open, revealing the knife scar on his chest. Henry, I rubbed the tie on my wrist. Am I really? You are Adam Lee. He ran a red light. The child I raised. The car stopped on the Cross Sea Bridge. The sound of the rising tide was like whimpering. Under the moonlight, Henry's gaze fell on my hand clutching the seatbelt. There was still cream on it. I sat quietly, waiting for his explanation. Your mother was a very good person. I always respected her. Henry's fingers tapped on the steering wheel 7 times. It was his familiar rhythm of thinking. That day, I was looking for textbooks in the attic. I ran into a drunk Richard forcing himself on Catherine. He was tearing her clothes. Slap after slap fell. Blood mixed with broken teeth was spat out. He was trying to kill her. So I grabbed an iron and smashed the back of his head. He didn't die. He didn't faint either. He sobered up. And then he claimed we were having an affair. I looked up, crashing into the vortex of bloodshot veins in his irises. I never expected the truth to be like this. What happened after? After that, he found people to force medicine on Catherine. He tried every possible way to get rid of the child. Luckily, I was there to stop it every time. Henry's eyes darkened. But just that one time. I wasn't there. Just that one time, Richard forced Catherine to jump off a building. Catherine died. And you were gone. I went crazy. I searched every corner. Finally, I found you, covered in blood, in a trash can. I lowered my head and picked at my fingernails, burying my head in the shadows. So you raised me just to fulfill her last wish? At first, yes. He reached out and lifted the hood of my sweatshirt. His thumb wiped away the frosting on the tip of my nose. Later, I found that the little crybaby holding a milk bottle and hiccuping was much cuter than a cold will. Your first tooth loss. Your first wet dream. The first time you stole my shirt to wear. I knew it all. But every time I thought, asterisk, this is the child Catherine exchanged her life for. Asterisk, I shouldn't, and couldn't, have those kinds of thoughts. I reached out and touched his Adam's apple. And now, Henry grabbed my fingers and pressed them to his lips, licking off the cream. Now you are Adam Lee. My wife. The car fragrance suddenly burst with citrus sweetness, mixing with the lingering scent of bitter orange on him. When I lifted my leg to straddle him, Henry didn't dodge. Henry. My nose brushed his collarbone. I want you. Now. His palm pressed down along my spine. The suit pants fabric made a friction sound. Here. Here. The bridge suddenly vibrated. A cargo ship whistle pierced through the glass. When Henry bit open the tie on my wrist, the rearview mirror reflected the neon spots of the wedding banquet. Slow. My protest was blocked in my throat. The metal buckle of the seatbelt dug into my lower back. It turned out the car system could record the seat inclination angle. It turned out the flashlights of night fishermen swept past outside the soundproof glass. It turned out the load-bearing pillars of the Cross Sea Bridge would sway with our breathing. When Henry tied the drawstring of my sweatshirt for me, the bridge deck had returned to calm. Now we can go home. I curled up in the passenger seat, gnawing on the strawberry cake he bought. Cream smeared onto the corner of my mouth. He leaned over and licked away the white stain. The Civil Affairs Bureau opens at 9 tomorrow. The car radio suddenly interrupted with a heavy rain warning. Henry, Hmm. Actually, I stole a look at the medical report at the bottom of your bookcase last year. The tires skidded half a meter on the wet road. Veins popped up on the back of Henry's hand, holding the steering wheel. I laughed out loud with the plastic fork in my mouth. The assessment report was quite interesting. Raindrops smashed onto the windshield, like someone's rapid heartbeat. So, he took the cake box from my hand. So, you knew long ago? Even if you marked me, I might never differentiate into an omega. I grabbed his right hand, my gaze falling on his lips. But you still bit me. You left a permanent mark on the back of my neck. You gambled on that 13% success rate. What? Henry gripped my hand back, his palm burning hot. Because that day when you stood on tiptoe to kiss me, the monitor showed your heartbeat was faster than mine. I was sure. You like me too. Henry. Actually, I secretly changed the medical report. I laughed against his earlobe. I lowered the success rate by 85%. Henry suddenly froze. The real number was. I bit his earlobe until it bled. 97. When the feeling of weightlessness rushed up, he whispered against my ear bone. The wedding is set for the 7th of next month. The tires rubbed against the ground, sending sparks flying. I shouted over the roar of the engine. What about the dowry? My life is yours. The wedding was finally set for the beginning of autumn. I insisted on a Chinese style. I wanted to experience the ritual of stepping over a fire basin. Of course, that was just an excuse. Mainly, it was that nightmare. It was too real. So Henry hired an old master from Suzhou to hand embroider the wedding attire. The dragon and phoenix wandering on the red silk with gold thread looked like they were about to come alive. 3 sounds of the joy gong penetrated the window paper. The master of ceremonies dragged out a long tone shouting that the auspicious time had arrived. Henry suddenly grabbed my wrist. The wide sleeves of the wedding robe hung down, covering our clasped hands. It's not too late to run now. The moment the red veil fell, I bit the web of his thumb. If we run, you're carrying me. The charcoal in the fire basin crackled, exploding with sparks. Henry really did carry me horizontally over the copper basin. The matron of honor screamed that it wasn't according to the rules. I bit his ear through the veil. Henry, I smell strawberry cake. It's icing in the back kitchen. His palm pressed against my butterfly bone. After drinking the nuptial wine, when the dragon and phoenix candles burst with lamp flowers, I lifted the veil to peek at the rim of the cup. Henry suddenly cupped the back of my head. The nuptial wine flowed down my throat along our intertwined tongues. The wine mixed with the mint candy he had secretly eaten in the morning, so cool that my toes curled inside the red embroidered shoes. The faded Play-Doh ring lay in a brocade box. The inner circle was engraved with a crooked LMY. When the veil was completely lifted, Henry was swapping my Play-Doh ring with that platinum band. I rolled over and pinned him down. The golden silk dates in the bright red wedding quilt dug into my knees. Henry. Actually, I knew you bought that ring yourself. His fingers threaded through my loose hair bun. How so? A 6-year-old kid's Play-Doh. How could they think to mold initials? I lowered my head and bit his chin. You wanted to cage me in a long time ago, didn't you? Henry didn't deny it. Instead, he gripped my waist, pressing me deeper against him. The scent of bitter orange mixed with the osmanthus brew of the nuptial wine dissolved on the tip of my tongue. Step 1 of keeping a canary. He undid the pearl button on the collar of my cheongsam. First, turn yourself into a cage. Then you better lock me up tight, Henry. Even if I'm happy to be here. The button rolled onto the gold-woven carpet, like a heartbeat that couldn't be hidden in time. Outside the window, magpies flapped their wings, circling 3 times before landing back on the branch. Next crossing. Preening feathers. Carrying half a length of red string.